The Penre Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The Third Level of Learning. http://wespenre.com. The Third Level of Learning. Paper number 2, In Wait for Things to Come. By Penre, Friday, February 1, 2013. Part 2. 4. Dimensions and densities according to channeled sources. This is a very confusing subject for people who decide to look into channeling, because different sources have different dimension and density systems that they are using to get across their message. Mainstream science almost always uses the term dimension when speaking of different aspects of the universe. With string theory being quite popular these days in quantum physics, we learn that the universe consists of 11 dimensions, which are all very, very tiny like strings, thus string theory. However, they don't normally speak of densities. In metaphysics we usually speak of densities, more often so than of dimensions. Wherein the confusion lies. In reality, our universe consists of both dimensions and densities, like I described in Level 2, Metaphysical Paper Number 2, Creation of Universes, June 15, 2012, Rev. December 12, 2012. The universe consists of a certain number of dimensions, and between these dimensions we have the densities, which are the gradual change in vibration between dimension A and dimension B, while we're reaching for one while being in the other. It can most easily be illustrated like in Figure 3 below. Here we see how we move from one density to the next before we reach the next dimension. This diagram is based upon the theory of 8 densities, an octave, where the 8th density is the next dimension. So this simple diagram can basically be read in 2 different ways. One way would be to look at we humans living in the 3rd dimension, and depending on our awareness level, we operate in any of density 1 to 7 within the 3rd dimension. We could perhaps say that plants operate in density 1, while animals in general operate in density 2. We humans again, in general operate in density 3, but in reality exist in densities 3 to 7 as long as we are still stuck in the 3rd dimension. A more aware human would, according to this diagram, operate closer to density 7, but we all fluctuate between the densities depending on if we have a good day or a bad day, so to speak. Even the most aware person sometimes operate in density 3, particularly when he or she is at a workplace which focuses on tasks more in line with 3rd density vibrations, just to later in the day, when the person comes home and attends to their favorite spiritual exercise, fly up to density 6 or 7 again. As a side note, I need to point out that although we are generally considered to live in the 3rd dimension, most scientists rogue or mainstream would add a 4th dimension to that, where the 4th dimension is time. This is of course correct, but confuses the matter even more, because many metaphysical researchers use the 4th dimension as the dimension where the bad ETs dwell. I wouldn't say that these so-called bad ETs, shape-shifting reptilians or otherwise, live in the pure time dimension, if people like David Icke are correct. And I don't think that's what these researchers intend to say either. So, as you can see, the matter is quite complicated. A second way of looking at diagram 1 would be to interpret the 7 densities like we interpreted dimensions in the previous paragraph. In this case, we would live in the 3rd density, as shown in the diagram. When the sources talk about ascension, they speak about moving from the 3rd density, in which we currently dwell, up to the 4th, or even to the 5th, depending on whom we listen to. Then, when we reach the 7th density, we have, together with our soul group, usually our species, such as humankind in our case, transformed into a collective complex almost only consisting of light. Some, like the RA collective, say that after the 7th density, we merge with all that is, God or the Goddess, and have thus completed an octave, i.e. we have, as a body/spirit/mind complex transformed into a star. After that, we start our journey into the next octave of densities, and so it goes on for all infinity, the way the RA body/spirit/mind complex, BSMC from now on, have understood it. Dimension B in the diagram will thus work as the octave, or the 8th density, and dimension A will be the fulfillment of the previous octave. There is yet another way of looking at densities. This obvious point of view is too often overlooked. If you are in a room, there are several densities existing in that room at the same time, and you perceive all these densities simultaneously. In Figure 3 you can see a typical living room with a few things in it. The pillows on the couch, for example, are lighter than the couch itself, and is therefore of a lower density than the couch. The couch would be considered of higher density than the pillows, but in metaphysics we don't measure the weight of an object, but the gain of awareness and consciousness to the soul. Hence, we see the soul as becoming heavier the higher up the densities we move, and thus we move from lower densities to higher. But the furniture in a room is nonetheless another example of densities, and that we live in different densities throughout the day, depending on the space we're in. In the RA material, http://laophone.info/right:, the term density is quite satisfactory explained, however. It is not literal, but an analog. Densities in metaphysics is often another word for dimensions. Here is the direct explanation, word by word, and the letters and numbers within parentheses, e.g., B2, 15, means the book Law of 1, Book 2, Session 15. Density of consciousness, or density of vibration, B4, 28. Frequently used by RA as an analog to what is currently thought of as dimensions in the universe. The densities are organized into an eightfold octave system, analogous to the musical octave and the visual light spectrum. Therefore the higher the density, the higher the level of consciousness. Harvest equals the process whereby a soul and/or planet graduates from one density to the next. Occurs naturally as a planetary system traverses through different areas of energy density in the galaxy, thus creating dimensional shifts. These shifts occur in precise, measurable cycles of time. So it has to do with planetary shifts, when a planet goes from one density/dimension to another. This is, according to the source, when the beings living there have had to make a choice whether they want to follow Earth on her journey to the fourth density, or if they want to stay in the third. If we choose the former, we need to be 51% sto, service to others, to graduate, or we won't vibrate on the same level as the planet, and therefore not qualify. Another option is to be 95% or more negative, and if we are, we apparently vibrate on Earth's fourth density vibration as well, but in the negative field, some powers that be qualify for this option. In the latter case where we choose to continue being in 3D, we need to be moved away from Earth, because we don't vibrate on her new, higher frequency. We will be transported, by RA and others, to another 3D planet somewhere in the universe. Those who are evil, such as the global elite, but are still less than 95% evil, service to self STS, will follow those 3D humans to the new planet and continue to control them there. Some say that the fourth density is the last density for Earth, and when it will be time for her to ascend again, she won't be able to, and those who graduate from fourth to fifth density have to be moved. Others say that Earth will ascend all the way up to seventh density. In other words, a soul group, such as humanity, has 75,000 years in third density to decide whether they want to ascend with the planet they live on, or start all over on another planet until they are ready to ascend. And herein lies the difference and the confusion people may have felt regarding densities and dimensions. The sources are only talking about ascension together with the planet you are born on, while if you leave the planet and go somewhere else in the universe, this density concept is no longer valid. Well off planet, you live in a universe where you are free to explore almost all densities and dimensions. I say almost, because there are, I believe, some upper dimensions of the KHAA which we need approval to enter, more based on character than evolution, from what I understand. These higher realms, which Anton Parks calls the angle, are guarded by the Orion Empire. So, if you are already of fourth density, to continue living in that density if you decide to leave Earth and go to another planet, you need to find a fourth density planet in order to keep your vibration intact. If you incarnate on another 3D world, your vibrations will adjust to the lower realms of the third. But if you're invited to visit a 3D world, you do so in spirit, nano-travel, or use a genetically engineered body which can live in third density. I personally think that the first example, which is presented in diagram 1, is much closer to how the universe is perceived by most beings, much closer to how it really works, but there are not many sources who use that construct. Most of them use the second way of looking at it. Then, again, to make matters more complex, different sources use different amount of densities in their teachings. RA, like I said, use octaves, 7 densities, where the 8th is the beginning of a new octave, very similar to the Western musical scale, C D E F G A B C, or Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Si or Ti Do, where the second C, Do, is the same note as the first C, Do, only 1 octave higher, i.e. it vibrates on a much higher frequency than the lower C. It's a good allegory to use the musical scale, as a matter of fact, even if people are not musically inclined, because it explains things quite easily. On a piano, for example, if you play a musical scale from a lower C to an upper C, you can hear, even if you're not a musician, how the notes go higher and higher in frequency and appear less dense to the listener. Lastly, before we move on, let me continue on my thought from an earlier paragraph. I said that RA is using octaves to explain ascension, but there are those, like the Guardian Alliance, data streamed by Ashayana Dian, aka Anna Hayes, who use 15 densities in their ascension process. Other common numbers are 11 and 12. So why is there such a difference between sources? If they are living in the same universe, how can there be different amounts of densities or dimensions depending on whom you ask? I don't know if anybody has ever asked a source this question, which is unfortunate, because it would take off a lot of confusion on the subject, if the answer is reliable, that is. However, there is a good explanation for this: there are no set densities, and that's the bottom line of it. You can't say in all honesty that now you jumped from density 3 to density 4. It's arbitrary at best. When we listen to a source, it sounds like there is a line drawn in the sand, saying that here is the third density, and if you cross this line you are in the fourth. That's not accurate and quite misleading. Densities, like everything else in the universe/multiverse, are fluid, which means that they interact with each other. The third interact and blend with the fourth and vice versa. Awareness and consciousness in a being increased incrementally, and no one is jumping from one density to another from one day to the other. Things change and vibrations increase little by little, and we are able to perceive realities that previously were occluded. We may be able to zoom in and out of the other world, which is the KHAA, or the 96%, which we talked a lot about in Level 2. Please review if these concepts have become vague in memory, or look them up in the dictionary for a faster review. Eventually we will be able to travel in our light bodies, avatars, to other dimensions and densities, both in the KHAA and in the 4% universe, while we still are grounded here on Earth in our much denser, physical 3, or 4, dimensional bodies. The third dimension, or the third density, depending on which concept we use, is the dimension of matter. This is where non-physicals incarnate when they want to experience a period of time in a denser environment, basically for learning lessons. It shouldn't be a big deal, and it should actually be fun and very interesting, but in our case we have had our version of 3D locked in by the Syrian Alliance when they took over the planet, which means that souls who incarnate here get stuck in a loop of seemingly endless cycles of reincarnation, which this ET Alliance has created. It is certainly not meant to be this way, but here we are, stuck for eons in the grip of an alien invader force. So the way we experience 3D here on Earth is an exception rather than a rule, or is at least meant to be. I will talk more about this in a later paper, where I show that the Syrians have set this up even smarter than we may have thought. If they would be put on trial for what they've done, they may, incredibly enough, get away with their crimes. They are smooth criminals, to borrow a term from a Michael Jackson song. They have set it up in a way that they can show that whatever we humans have experienced here on Earth in form of negativity, pain, and suffering, is not their fault, because we choose to experience it. This is why some say that it's a CO creation. We humans, wittingly or unwittingly, have agreed to pretty much everything we have been subjected to. Now, we are not supposed to reincarnate, but to leave a reality whenever we want to. It should be a choice. Incredibly enough, as I have found out through my new research, not even the reincarnation process can be blamed on the Syrian alliance. It's totally voluntarily, it's just that we humans don't know it. So we choose to reincarnate here over and over, not even knowing that we don't have to. This is both bad news and good news at the same time, because once we've learned that, we can break the cycle of reincarnation. And I will tell you how in a later paper. I hope the reader is not too confused after this lesson in dimensions and densities. My hope is that it is actually sorting things out for those who have had problems understanding these concepts. VRA and the different light bodies. In level 2 we talked a lot about avatars. This is not a new concept here on Earth, however. It was known by Pythagoras already in the antique how it is possible for a human body to leave his/her physical 3D body and explore the universe in one of our light bodies, avatars. In a book from 1979 about Pythagoras' life, it is talking about it in some detail. I watched a video where Professor Roger Weir from Shared Presence Foundation read out loud from this book, describing the exact thing I have been talking about here to quite some extent. Further, Pythagoras was talking about that life in the universe is multidimensional, and most beings living out there in the multiverse are non-physicals, in our terms. He said that it was the norm rather than an exception, and that we humans who are living here in biological, physical bodies are the awkward ones, not the other way around. So this was known during the antique, and this knowledge, and more, which Pythagoras inhabited made him to some kind of Buddha or Christ figure of his time. This knowledge, of course, was later suppressed by the mainstream religion and the Catholic Church, and people in Greece and elsewhere went pretty much back to sleep again. Our metaphysical sources, however, speak a lot about light bodies, but for some odd reason they are not very keen on mentioning that you can use them for space travel while you are alive here on Earth. The RA material, for example, talks about 7 light bodies, one for each density, but nothing about space travel. When I discuss avatars, the light bodies are the avatars, but the way I understand it is this: each fire in our body is a spark of the divine, coming directly from the Mother Goddess. All these fires are not physical per se, but are making up the shape of the physical, biological body. The fires in themselves are microscopic in size, but they are all connected with each other on a super sub-quantum level and communicate with each other. All the fires in the body make up the whole, not only a physical whole, but also a metaphysical whole. This metaphysical whole is creating one or more light bodies around the physical body, e.g. we have a light body/avatar which is the main light body we are supposed to use in nano travel. More about that here below. Another body is the emotional body. In my previous diagrams I drew one avatar/light body around the physical body to simplify it at that point, wishing to wait with describing the bigger picture until we get into this section about channeling. We have an enormous amount of fires in our body, and if each fire is a part of the whole, it also has the imprint of the whole inside of it. So, let's say we want to nano travel to another galaxy. We can then stay here in our physical bodies and send out one or more of these fires to travel long distance in almost no time at all it takes is a thought. Arriving at the destiny, this fire, or a combination of fires, can then manifest in a light body by the intention of these fires. Also, the fires can decide what shape and form they want this light body/avatar to take, and we have shape-shifting explained right there. With some practice, we can make it look and behave very physical. These fires, who are part of the whole, communicate back and forth to the soul and the body here on Earth, and the experience will be that we are actually traveling through space and will experience everything in the distant galaxy just as real as if we would travel there in a nuts and bolts spacecraft in our biological bodies. Today's humans are still not there in their development, so they can do that in full capacity. Some people can do it to a certain extent, and others through technology, because we have been taught that this is fantasy at best and witchcraft at its worst. Also, we are being subjected to low-frequency bombardment on a cellular level, and therefore it is impossible to nano-travel until we raise our vibration above what is preset as the norm for the human mass consciousness. Therefore, ignorant as we are when we depart from our physical bodies at body death in our light bodies, which are made up of equally ignorant fires, we can see where a certain soul was in her development here on earth. If we look at a light body that is separating from a deceased biological body, we would see it has a similar shape as the physical body, but is glowing in a certain color, or more often, vaguely shifts colors back and forth. This is because there is more than one light body all merged into one, or rather, that's what it looks like. Now, each range of vibration has its corresponding color, so depending on your awareness level, your light body will have a certain predominant color, which we will go into more details about in a minute. We also call this aura. That's why different discarnate souls who visit us may seem to have one predominant color, although they may sometimes shift between several colors, almost like a Christmas tree, but not as dominant. When we discuss the phenomenon of light bodies in relation to our metaphysical sources, I'm going to use the RA material as a model, because it describes what other sources touch on pretty well. But before we do so, I want to remove another confusion that I'm sure has bothered many metaphysical truth seekers. It has to do with the complexity of densities again. The RA material speaks of 7 light bodies, one for each density, in a sense that it sounds like when you jump from one density to another because you have reached that level of awareness, not only the color of your light body changes, but a totally different light body gets activated. According to my research, this is not what happens. The way I see it is that there is one light body, which I call avatar, and that will certainly change color according to your awareness level. Psychics see that in auras all the time, and your emotional body is somewhat merged with this avatar. This is why psychics can see wounded parts of your aura and your chakras, and can read your emotional state. Although this subject with light bodies in relation to the sources is not crucial for what I am wanting to get across regarding these entities, I think it's good to know, and if it can shed some light, no pun intended, on an otherwise confusing subject, I believe it's worth bringing up. So, let's go over to the RA material. I am aware of that the quality of the answer you get from the sources depends on how you formulate and address the question. I definitely get the impression that the RA collective are talking about 7 different light bodies, and not one body shifting color. I do not agree with ascension through densities in the way they and many channeled sources explain it, so I find some of this information inaccurate and misleading, but for the purpose of this and upcoming papers, it's irrelevant what I think. I am only relaying information as it is presented by others, the vehicles/channelers and the entities. I will, however, wedge in a few comments every now and then. I can't help myself. Although, like I explained earlier in this paper, different sources use a different amount of densities in their teachings, I am here going to concentrate on, and mostly stay with, Ra's 8 densities, or the octave, as this seems to be more commonly used, and also, in some sense, is more accurate according to my own research. If we use 12 or 15 densities, the following information is not relevant. According to RA, the densities are as follows. First density, fire, air, earth, and water, equivalent to 4 of the 5 elements, where the 5th is ether/ether. This is the red ray density, corresponding to what they call the red ray body. Second density, consists of animals, trees, minerals, and plants. I put plants within parentheses, because they do belong to the second density. However, only the 3 first mentioned are inspirited, according to RA. They are not outright saying that plants are not, but they are only mentioning the first 3 as being inhabited by spirits, which is not accurate. The second density lasted for 4.6 billion years here on Earth. The color of the light body of this density is orange, the orange ray body. Third density, Homo sapiens sapiens, the thinking man. This is the density of self-awareness. Not until third density is reached, a being is self-aware, an animal is not. The purpose of the third density is not to gain knowledge and wisdom, but to learn the ways of love. This density normally lasts for 75,000 years, followed by the Great Harvest. If the third density beings can't be harvested at that point, they will be transferred to another planet and start the cycle all over again for another 75,000 years period. The time for the great harvest is now. The light body of the third density is the yellow ray body. Fourth density, this is the density of compassion and understanding. Selves are not hidden to other selves, and communication is done telepathically. Not until here are you supposed to get the understanding that we truth seekers are looking for. In 4D you are denser in consciousness than the 3D body, and this is an important statement from RA, because it explains why they consider each ascension process as a rise in density. The body the fourth density beings are using is less dense than the third density, however. We see here that the densities according to channeled sources are not the same as dimensions used by traditional science, or fourth density would have been that of time. The fourth density is the density where the soul group starts acting more like what RA and others call a social memory complex, which is when people in the soul group start acting more like one with each other. The group becomes more important and everybody's thoughts start to slowly merge into becoming one with the Creator. The beings of fourth density choose to be invisible to third density beings like ourselves, but can be visible if they choose. This is why those who choose the negative path, see next paragraph, are able to show themselves to us in 3D, and where information like that of David Icke comes from, that the evil reptilians are of lower fourth density, or fourth density negative. The harvest into fourth density is both of negative and positive nature depending on if the person is oriented towards service to self, STS, or service to others, STO. To qualify for ascension into fourth density positive you need to be 51% STO or more. To qualify for fourth density negative you have to be 95% or more STS. Those in between will stay in 3D, but will be transported to another 3D planet due to that Earth is becoming a 4D planet herself. Your lifespan in the fourth density body is approximately 90,000 years, and the density itself lasts for about 30 million years, all counted from our perspective or time. The fourth density uses a green ray body. According to RA, it's the awareness of all as the one creator that opens the green ray center 10, i.e. the awareness of that we are all one opens up this center, which steers the soul in the direction towards the fourth density. Fifth density, the density of wisdom. It's an extremely free density, and we can choose whether we want to learn as an individual or as a social memory complex. It's about compassion leading to wisdom, an extreme focus on the heart center. To graduate to this density you need to accept the honor and duty of the law of one, which means that we are all one with the Creator, and we are all working towards becoming one with it again. In the cosmology of RA, God has no gender, and gender ceases to exist in the seventh density. This density, just like the fourth, accepts both positive and negative harvest, so there are still negatively oriented beings living here, choosing the negative path to serve the Creator in the learning process of knowing itself. Their physical appearance is very similar to ours, so they could come to Earth and pass themselves off as humans. Also, in the universe of RA, the only really negative beings who are visiting Earth in the physical are the Orions. Many are supposedly from the fifth density, but some also from the fourth negative. There is a reason why RA is blaming the Orion group for interfering with our development, and it will be explained under its own section later in this paper. The fifth density is extremely white in vibration, according to RA, but uses a blue ray body. Sixth density, RA says, this quality relates to the blending into wisdom of the compassion learned in fourth density. This is the density the RA social memory complex is currently in, about to be harvested into the seventh density. However, just like Marciniak's Pleiadians, RA needed to revisit humankind and did so through channeling. Both the Pleiadians and RA have a history with tampering with our evolution, and the results were negative. According to RA, their intention was good. They claim they were the ones building the Egyptian pyramids, but by interfering with us in their physical, the result was not what they anticipated, so they left. They actually visited us more than once, as we shall see. Now, before they can go to the seventh density, they have to have a clean record and make up for negative results from actions in the past, or they won't be able to proceed. The Pleiadians present a slightly different scenario for us, but there are also a lot of similarities. The Pleiadians worked with the SA-Def already from the beginning when Lord Enlil and his warriors came here and chased the Aryans, Orions, away, 500,000 years ago, and now they have to make up for the consequences, or they won't be able to evolve from where they are, in our future. From here on, I will call the Aryans Orions, because of the misunderstanding it created for some readers, who confused the Aryans/Orions with the Aryan race which Hitler supported and tried to mass-produce during World War II. So it seems like these entities, or social memory complexes, can get away with not taking responsibility for their actions for quite some time, but at one point in their development, evolution, they need to stop what they're doing and go back in time and correct their mistakes. If this is true, this is something you and I need to think about as well. In an upcoming paper I am going to bring up a quite interesting future potential scenario which involves humankind as a spacefaring species. The scenario has been very real for the Pleiadians as it were. In the sixth density, negative and the positive, darkness and light, merge into one positive social memory complex and service to self does no longer exist. Everything is group thinking and a matter of using the compassion learned in fourth density and merging that with the wisdom gained in the fifth density to become a whole soul group, with one goal, which is to blend together with all there is, or the one creator in density 7. The light body is a indigo ray body. The reader has probably noticed that the color of the ray bodies are the same as that of the rainbow, or the light spectrum. According to science, the more something moves towards the blue, indigo, and violet colors of the spectrum, the warmer/hotter that something becomes. The same principle goes for stars. However, this is somewhat misleading, because we see the universe from a 3D manipulated 4% universe perspective, while those who live in, and have access to the KHAA/void may look at the universe totally differently. In level 2 I tried to explain this with the allegory of a spider web, and that is probably pretty close to how multidimensional, interdimensional non-physicals see the universe. It's a myriad of galactic and intergalactic highways, which are the web strings in the spider web. Seventh density, the completed being, the one creator knowing itself through the social memory complex ascending from density 6, and merge with the creator. I would say that this is equivalent with a soul group igniting and becoming a star. Polarity does no longer exist and everything is a constant now. In the sixth density, social memory complexes are working directly with their teachers to complete the octave. Due to that RA is only a sixth density complex, some of the seventh density is dwelled in mystery, and they don't know exactly what will happen. Intelligent infinity turns to intelligent energy from the eighth density. The seventh density body is the violet ray body. Eighth density, the tipping point. Here is where one octave ends and a new octave begins. Very little is known about this density, says RA, but the logical process is that it's a fast density where life starts all over in the first density of a new, higher octave, where the learning process is 100% unknown to RA. There is no light body assigned to this density. This structure, with a few modifications, is representative for most sources. That's what we are taught. One thing most of them have in common as well is the harvest. Everything in their teachings is pointing in the direction of the harvesting of souls. I also found a reference in the RA material directly to the different light bodies, which is more detailed and excludes the density comparison. I'd like to share that as well. 1. The red ray body. RA, the red ray is your chemical body. However, it is not the body which you have as clothing in the physical. It is the unconstructed material of the body, the elemental body without form. This basic unformed material body is important to understand, for there are healings which may be carried out by the simple understanding of the elements present in the physical vehicle. B2, 114. 2. The orange ray body. RA, this is the physical body complex. It is still not the body you inhabit, but rather the body formed without self-awareness, the body in the womb before the spirit/mind complex enters. This body may live without the inhabitation of the mind and spirit complexes, but seldom does so. B2, 114. 3. The yellow ray body. Ra. This is your physical vehicle which you know of at this time and in which you experience catalyst. 4. The green ray body. Ra. This is a lighter body packed more densely with life. It is the body that is seen in seance when what you call ectoplasm is furnished. Some call it the astral body. Others have called it the etheric body, but this is not correct in the sense that the etheric body is that body of gateway wherein intelligent energy is able to mold the mind/body/spirit complex. B2, 115. 5. The blue ray body or light body. Ra. The light body or blue ray body may be called the Devachanic body. There are many other names for this body, especially in your so-called Indian sutras or writings, for there are those among these peoples which have explored these regions and understand the various types of Devachanic bodies. There are many, many types of bodies in each density, much like your own. B2, 115. Ra. There is always some difficulty in penetrating blue primary energy, for it requires that which your people have in great paucity, i.e., scarcity, that is, honesty. Blue ray is the ray of free communication with self and with other self. B2, 121. 6. The indigo ray body. Ra. This is what we choose to call the etheric body. It is the gateway body. You may only see this body as that of light, as it may mold itself as it desires. B2, 116. This is clearly the body which best corresponds with what I call the avatar. Wes comment. Ra. This is the first body that activates itself upon death. It is the form maker, or what the Egyptians referred to as Ka. This body remains until understanding has been gained by the mind/body/spirit complex. Then a body of another ray, e.g. green, is activated. B2, 116. Ra. This indigo body, being intelligent energy, is able to offer the newly dead, as you would term it, a soul perspective and a place from which to view the experience most recently manifested. B2, 117. 7. The violet ray body. Ra. You may call this the Buddha body, or that body which is complete. Within it lies a sense of wholeness which is extremely close to unity with all that there is. B2, 115. Ra. This may be seen to be manifested by a sense of the consecrate or hallowed nature of everyday creations and activities. B2, 121. Now, to end this section with light bodies, Ra is claiming that we all possess these 7 light or ray bodies as they call them, but only the one we are using for the specific density we are in is activated. However, it sounds like we are able to also activate the ray bodies that are beneath the level we're at. This can be seen as Ra technically telling us that this is what we call shape-shifting. I talked to another metaphysical researcher and truth seeker who is very much into channeling, and is leading a well-known channeling group in California. I discussed the harvest and the limitation of awareness the idea of densities is. He agreed with me in some, but said that the use of densities in the fashion our sources do is just so people can easier understand the concept of ascension and the raising of frequencies. That was his way of making sense of it. I can see where he's coming from, but I think that despite the sometimes complex language in the RA material, it is quite straightforward on the density subject, and there is not much room for interpretation. He also mentioned that the 7 densities could very well directly correspond to the 7 chakras. Before we move on to the next paper, I want to talk a little bit more about the RA material in general, in addition to their density system and the way they look at light bodies. My intention is to compare different channeled sources in the next paper with a purpose to figure out whether these entities are here in our best interest, in their best interest, in a shared best interest, or with the intention to harm us. I can tell the reader already now that it's a mix of it all, but it is obvious that a lot of them are here with the same motivation, and it has to do with the harvest of souls. Whether this is benevolent or not is something we shall discuss, but is ultimately up to the reader to decide. RA visited Earth 18,000 years ago for the first time in the physical. At that time they were a 6th density civilization living on Venus. They were half etheric. They had the ability to nano-travel, they call it that they traveled with their thoughts, and their bodies were tall, slender, and shining with a golden glow to them. However, when they visited Earth, they came in bell-shaped spaceships which were crystal-powered 12. These spacecraft could be seen over Egypt when they arrived, but the Egyptians did not pay much notice to them, according to RA, because at that time, Earth was visited by many ET civilizations, and vessels in the sky was an almost daily event. Dr. Don Elkins, who mostly came up with the questions and was the one who asked them in the RA sessions, once asked RA which ETs use physical spaceships and who are not, and just like I explained in Level 2, advanced beings don't need them. Here are their comments. For the most part those coming from distant points do not need craft as you know them. The question requires understanding you do not possess. We shall attempt to state what can be stated. There are a few third density entities, for example, those from Sirius, who have learned how to use craft to travel between star systems while experiencing the limitations you now understand, namely very long flight times. Book B, Session 3, Question 7, or B3, 7. Fourth, fifth, and sixth density entities use one of two other means. 1. One type of craft can arrive without any time lapse at all, using a slingshot gravitic light effect. B3, 7. 2. The other type is a type of experience, rather than a craft. These entities have learned the necessary disciplines enabling them to view the universe as one being and, therefore, are able to proceed from one location to another by thought alone, materializing the necessary craft, if you will, to enclose the light body of the entity. B3, 7. In sixth density there are virtually no entities which any longer use outer technology for travel or communication. B3, 13. I have talked a lot about becoming multi-D in our bodies and being able to travel with our thoughts and bring our light body/avatar with us instead of using nuts and bolts spaceships, or even interdimensional spaceships. According to RA that happens in upper fifth density and the sixth. If that is the case, we are heading towards fifth and sixth density, not the fourth, because we are going to learn how to nano-travel. 18,000 years ago was the middle of the last ice age, Figure 5, which at that time only affected the northern and the southern hemispheres. The middle part of the world was not under the ice cap at all, but the temperature was colder than now. According to RA themselves, 18,000 years ago when they visited both Egypt and Atlantis, aid was given to the latter, but not the former. They found that the people of Egypt were quite self-contradictory when came to religion, and many people chose to worship the hawk-headed sun god, Horus. The RA people say they never come unless they are called for, and both 18,000 and 11,000 years ago there was a call for them to come and assist. However, on their first visit, due to the contradiction with religious beliefs, RA didn't think it was appropriate for them to heed the call for their vibration, so they left without taking action. Next time they visited was 11,000 years ago. We know, because RA has admitted to it, that they had problems with establishing certain earthly time periods and get them right, so 11,000 years ago may be only slightly correct, and 11,000 years ago would have been approximately the time of the Great Deluge. Anyway, they say that at this time they had more luck when they visited Egypt, and there were those who now were quite gung-ho on the law of one. Another sixth density group visited South America at the same time. This is what RA said about the 11,000 years ago visit. We are those of the Confederation who 11,000 of your years ago came to two of your planetary cultures which were at that time closely in touch with the creation of the one Creator. It was our naive belief that we could teach/learn by direct contact and the free will distortions of individual feeling or personality were in no danger, we thought, of being disturbed as these cultures were already closely aligned with an all-embracing belief in the liveness or consciousness of all. We came and were welcomed by the peoples whom we wished to serve. We attempted to aid them in technical ways having to do with the healing of mind/body/spirit complex distortions through the use of the crystal, appropriate to the distortion, placed within a certain appropriate series of ratios of time/space material. Thus were the pyramids created. We found that the technology was reserved largely for those with the effectual mind/body distortion of power. This was not intended by the law of one. We left your peoples. The group that was to work with those in the area of South America, as you call that portion of your sphere, gave up not so easily. They returned. We did not. However, we have never left your vibration due to our responsibility for the changes in consciousness we had first caused and then found distorted in ways not relegated to the law of one. We attempted to contact the rulers of the land to which we had come, that land which you call Egypt, or in some areas, the Holy Land. In the 18th dynasty, as it is known in your records of space/time distortions, we were able to contact a pharaoh, as you would call him. The man was small in life experience on your plane and was what this instrument would call, wanderer. Thus, this mind/body/spirit complex received our communication distortions and was able to blend his distortions with our own. This young entity had been given a vibratory complex of sound which vibrated in honor of a prosperous god, as this mind/body complex, which we call instrument for convenience, would call Ammon. The entity decided that this name, being in honor of one among many gods, was not acceptable for inclusion in his vibratory sound complex. Thus, he changed his name to one which honored the sun disk. This distortion, called Aten, was a close distortion to our reality as we understand our own nature of mind/body/spirit complex distortion. However, it does not come totally into alignment with the intended teach/learning which was sent. This entity, Akhenaten, became convinced that the vibration of one was the true spiritual vibration and thus decreed the law of one. However, this entity's beliefs were accepted by very few. His priests gave lip service only, without the spiritual distortion towards seeking. The peoples continued in their beliefs. When this entity was no longer in this density, again the polarized beliefs in the many gods came into their own and continued so until the one known as Muhammad delivered the peoples into a more intelligible distortion of mind/body/spirit relationships. So the Ra group claims to be the one who created the Great Pyramids, something which Sitchin devoted to Lord Ningishzida, also known as Thoth, Enki's son. So, we have a contradiction here, unless Ra actually come from either Orion or the Syrian alliance. Well, they say they developed on Venus and are a very old race in our terms. We know there are flaws in Sitchin's work, so that could be one explanation, but there is something with the planet Venus that is still dwelled in mystery. There are lots of contradictions regarding our neighboring planet, and many stories passed around, both on the internet and in books, definitely something humanity could gain knowledge from if someone wants to take time to research it. Ra talks more about the pyramids in another session, where they also tell us they are having difficulties with the timeline, but they are giving us some valuable information as of when the pyramids were built. Approximately 11,000 of your years ago we entered, by thought form, we correct this instrument. We sometimes have difficulty due to low vitality. Approximately 8500 years ago, having considered these concepts carefully, we returned, never having left in thought, to the thought form areas of your vibrational planetary complex and considered for some of your years, as you measure time, how to appropriately build these structures. The first, the Great Pyramid, was formed approximately 6,000 of your years ago. Then, in sequence, after this performing by thought of the building or architecture of the Great Pyramid using the more, shall we say, local or earthly material rather than thought form material to build other pyramidal structures. This continued for approximately 1500–1500 of your years. The time frame when the pyramids were built has always been subject to controversy, and the Pleiadians claim that they are much older than what Ra are saying here. The Pleiadians also have another story about how they were built, and that they were actually inserted from vertical time with sound frequencies, as I explained in level 2. But this is about the teachings of different channeled sources, so some information will contradict each other while other information will coincide. Of course, during all these visits, the SA had a stronghold over our planet, and these were the men of power that the Ra people are talking about. We know that Pharaoh Akhenaten was certainly a rebel of his time. He refused to worship several gods, which otherwise was the standard in Egypt when he lived, and these deities were Syrian gods, of course, and instead decided that there is only one god. The project failed, because no one, except perhaps the pharaoh and his wife, Nefertiti, endorsed the one god religion, or the law of one. When Akhenaten died, the Egyptians went back to worshipping the Syrian deities again. Interestingly enough, Ra also claimed to have a finger in Muhammad's revelation. I can't help it, but it appears to me that Ra is a more evolved faction of the Syrians, but I could be wrong. There are contradictions that we have to live with, but again, Venus is flashing all the time in the back of my head as I'm writing this. I feel it is an important, and missing part of the story. I may have to look into that more in the near future. Ra also mentions the term wanderers in the above quote. This means, for those who are not familiar with this concept, a soul from a higher density, usually fourth or fifth, who chooses to come to a certain planet which is in need of assistance, decides to incarnate there and help raising the frequencies. Wanderers often get caught in the Syrian trap system, however, and get recycled with the rest of the souls, but they are willing to make that sacrifice. Here is quite an interesting remark from Ra. Questioner: how were you able to make the transition from your Venus, and I assume the sixth dimension, which would that be invisible when you reached here? Did you have to change your dimensions to walk on the earth? Ra, you will remember the exercise of the wind. The dissolution into nothingness is the dissolution into unity, for there is no nothingness. From the sixth dimension, we are capable of manipulating, by thought, the intelligent infinity present in each particle of light or distorted light so that we were able to clothe ourselves in a replica visible in the third density of our mind/body/spirit complexes in the sixth density. We were allowed this experiment by the council which guards this planet. Here they clearly tell us how they are able to use their avatar to shapeshift, so they can descend into 3D, the material world, and that they had permission to do so from the Council of Saturn. We are going to talk more about all these councils and galactic federations in an upcoming paper, so we'll leave it with that for now. Anyway, Ra stopped visiting Earth, due to that they noticed that humans misunderstood their teachings because of language difficulties, and they are certainly not making it easier now, as their channeling can be hard for many to understand, and the visit in Egypt 11,000 years ago did not end well. Ra left humanity to their fate at that time, but say they haven't stopped looking over us since then. Now, however, they have come to a place in their own development when they need to make up for the damage they accidentally did to us all this time ago, by interfering with our evolution. They are making amends, they say, by teaching us through a channel what we want to know, and they also will be present at the time of the harvest. Ra says that the first humans on Earth came from Mars, Syrian laboratories. They certainly existed on Mars at that time and were used for genetic engineering and manipulation. However, this group of humans became so warlike, under Syrian influence, that they destroyed themselves and the planet at the same time. So they had to be transferred down to Earth around 75,000 years ago. There was no harvestable beings at that time. Then there was another planet in our solar system which they call Maldek, my old Terra in level 2, where an advanced, Atlantis-like society had formed. They, too, destroyed their planet utterly in an atomic war, and everybody without exception, died a violent death. It took a very long time, thousands of years, for the Confederation to even reach these beings, but 500,000 to 600,000 years ago they succeeded and untied the knot of fear and terror in this soul group. These beings were also transferred to Earth, because Earth was the only inhabited planet in 3D at that time, and these were 3D beings. However, they never incarnated in bodies, but allegedly live in our atmosphere, and when we see some paranormal activities, and some of the UFOs, they are Maldekians bleeding through the layers of reality. Some, however, later managed to incarnate in Neanderthal bodies. The Ra collective mentioned several times that mankind was living in correlation with many different star races in Atlantean and Egyptian times, and not all of them were benevolent. They also mention both Mars and Maldek as being two planets directly involved in our evolution, just like I've been saying. Ra is talking about a higher self, or an oversoul, which is a higher version of you, living in the upper sixth density, and therefore knows your path all the way up to that point. Because all time is simultaneous, something Ra endorses, your journey is already over from the viewpoint of your oversoul. However, it is there to guide you so that you can find an easier and faster path to get there. This concept can only be understood from a multidimensional, heart level, and is just mind-boggling for the 3D mind. In the sixth density, when you are just about to graduate to the seventh, you merge with your oversoul and you become one with it. Both the oversoul and the one creator are without gender in the Ra cosmology, and is normally addressed as it. Gender becomes obsolete in the sixth density, according to Ra, when individuals merge into a group soul, a social memory complex. In Ra's universe, only the one creator is without distortion. It just is. Anything added to that is called a distortion, although it's not meant in a negative way. The first distortion is the law of free will, the second is love, and the third is light. Thus, New Age people, and many metaphysicists use the terms love and light when communicating with each other, and when showing affinity and understanding, although it has more become like an automatic greeting, such as regards. Many sources, channeled through a human vehicle/body, say they are of the light, and if they say that, the channeler accepts the source as being benevolent. This can, as we shall see, be quite misleading, and may not at all be so. But that's something for the next paper.